So, first of all, I would like to begin by acknowledging the Gadi people of the Eora Nation and their custodianship of the land upon which we are here today and that many of us work on, and pay my respects to their elders, both past, present and emerging. And, the thing about an acknowledgement of country is that it is a deep recognition of the history of this land, going back at least 40,000 years. But also, those words can be a bit, we hear them a lot. And I do feel that also it's important to acknowledge, beyond often what our area of focus is, designing with country, that there are approximately, the population of Torres Strait Islanders and Aboriginal people in Australia is about 3.8%, and yet the prison population is 36%. So, in terms of social justice and equity, we certainly need more than nice words. I want to first of all welcome you to this venue, which we call Circle 6. It's complicated, it's on level 6, it's a circle, it's clever. And we're new here, we've moved into Australia Square, we're really excited about it. I personally didn't know this space existed till we were shown around it. So it's an incredibly special space, originally designed as an exhibition space. Harry Seidler really wanted to not have the first floor to be an office floor. He wanted that nervy ceiling to not just be in the lobby. But of course, it never made any sense. It really didn't work as an exhibition space. But we're here now. And so one of the things we wanted to do was share this space, to open this up to more people in our design community and our industry. So we organise these events once a month, and there's a little introduction to this space. And this evening we have a really special event for us. It's we have Jake Nash, Searching for Country, and we're really honoured to have Jake here. I think many of you have seen Jake's work out the front, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But first of all, I'd just like to tell you a little bit about Jake. So he's a descendant of the Daly River people west of Darwin, and has spent the last 20 years living and working here in Sydney on Eora country. He graduated from NIDA in 2005, not long ago, and in 2010 he designed the set for Earth and Sky for Bangarra and received the Green Room Award for Best Design in Dance. He was then appointed artist in resident at Bangarra and the following year, and then Bangarra head of design through until February 23-ish. Yeah. Really exciting is that he was appointed the inaugural creative director in residence for the Sydney Festival in 2021, which I think still goes into next year. Yep. Yeah, last month. But far more important than that is that he's been working with us since 2018, right? Which tells you how long it takes to do anything. And we've done a series of wonderful projects together. It's been a delight working with with Jake, and we've seen the royal work at King and Philip, which we might talk about a little bit later. You know, it's a work put into a colonial setting up on Macquarie Street, just opposite the statue of Queen Victoria. And we were determined, even though it was a private development, to say something about country in that setting. And I think that's an incredibly poetic work. But also here in the rocks, again, in a really sensitive location, I think a strong work, and perhaps most exciting of all is our collaboration with Jake and Bangawarra on the colourway, which is truly incredible. Anyone who's been down there can't fail to be moved by the experience of walking into that space, I think. So we're really honoured to have Jake here, and please welcome him.
Thank you. Technology. Thank you very much for that introduction, and it's lovely to be here tonight, and also I guess on a special moment and we'll talk about it, but I guess Eora 2, which is obviously on the wall behind us. It's so beautiful. It's to see it at this scale too, and it's much more, you're connected with it. We'll talk about the architecture and the, you know, how it sits within this space, but as the artist, it's a different version, and you feel, for me anyway, you're staring right into that central space, but you're also, you can see the whole extent of the work all at once, which is, it's lovely, and I'm honoured to have it here in this building, and our relationship that's 8 years. We've been talking and having these discussions for a long time. And for me, you have to have those sort of relationships, trust, conversation, extended relationships, because that's where the magic is. You find a conversation that you connect with from both sides. It doesn't matter where you're from or what your background is culturally or, you know, in your field. If you find that magic in the middle, that's where the magic happens. And so across all of the work I've done over the last 20 years, that's sort of what I've searched for. And I have a really diverse practice now. I did study set and costume design, and it taught me about storytelling, and it taught me about design, and it taught me about place and people. And for me, everything I approach, it's those three things: people, place, and story. The people, the connection, whether that's here with Richard, whether it's in a remote community in the Northern Territory, you're connected to a person, a community. They also will hold story or a brief, and you next people, place, then you've got the location. And all of those things, they don't exist separately, they exist as one thing. And for me, I sort of traverse all of those things all the time. Whether it be in a set design, whether it's, I was just shooting a short film as a designer in Arnhem Land this week. What else? I don't sit in a box. I do lots of things, but they all come back to the essence of what that is. And it's, of course, as a First Nation person, my mob's up in Daly River, but we have family now everywhere from Daly, Darwin, Queensland, southeast Queensland. But that's my lens. Everything is from that black lens. And then I guess Stephen Page used to always talk about the idea of fusion, bringing different cultures together and holding it in that moment. So my practice is diverse, and I also have a curatorial role at the Sydney Festival. I've had, this is my 5th year as the curator of the Blackout program. And I guess in a way you can also look at that and say it's about people, it's about place, and what are the most important black stories you can bring to Sydney in January. So it's diverse, and it is, I don't know, it's just how my brain operates, but it makes for some really amazing conversations and outcomes. The works that I'm going to be talking about today have all happened since Eora. Eora was, I think, probably my first public artwork in a permanent setting. I'd done a couple with Sydney Festival, and it was the beginning of a journey. You know, there's always collaborators, whether you're in theatre, film, TV, but the collaborators in the built environment, it's a different kind of, there's different pushes and pulls. Everyone's all about art over there, and then there's the money side, and then you get complexities. But you navigate it all. So it was an amazing journey to go on, but it began the conversation. And from that time, I've done, obviously, that was a while ago, lots of work. But I'd like to sort of begin the conversation with a work called Baleen. And Stephen Page made this work. You can see Adelaide 2024. It's just been up in Brisbane. You can see it, well, you can't yet, or you can just see it here. It's on a beach. So we were down in Adelaide at Glenelg Beach. I'll go through, you can see some site maps in a second. But he was telling a story. He's southeast Queensland, so he's got Munjali, and he's also got connection to Moreton Island as well. So that's his mum's side, his dad's side's Yugambeh. And he wanted to tell a story about his mother's connection to the ocean, but also to whales. And it's funny with Stephen because it starts in a very broad conversation and then it just keeps coming back to the same idea. And he wanted to have the ability to create a space on a beach that would allow performance to happen. And Adelaide Festival, they wanted to do something big, they wanted to do it outside. And you can sort of see here, this became what would become seating. So I think we had 5 shows, there was about 1,200 people a night. This became back of house, and that became actually our accommodation. That's where we stayed, which was quite useful, but just for scale there as well, it's a hotel. So all of a sudden, you've got this very large extent of beach that to play with, and as a designer, I think, for me anyway, my partner's here tonight, and it's big is always, I don't do small, it's always large. But we started talking about whales and how do you create a space that can hold story, but also be true to, I guess, the story he wants to tell. Whalebones obviously was a very beginning conversation. So we started to talk about how it can relate to design. And there's lots of, obviously, images like this.
Testing.
It's all across, references all across the internet and culturally as well in this country and overseas. But I sort of got really interested in how you can take those shapes. I just drew this on the iPad, and you'll see it in a sec too. Really, really early sketch of what it was. And there we are, and that was actually drawn in that moment. And what it did for me was actually just start to talk about scale and what these shapes would hold in terms of their, design value, how you can start shaping for a story. And it also talked about how big you guys all, I don't have to say this, how big things need to get so you can also sort of compete with this massive horizon line. Another version, and you sort of start to see what it is. And in the end, this was about 50 metres, that's for performance spaces, huge. Normally, you look at stages and you're probably around 12 to 14 by 12, something like that. And so, all of a sudden you're outdoors and you have to sort of start to think about how do you hold that story, but also make it still feel intimate, accessible, and not lost in the environment. And there you go. It's sort of where we ended up. I think for me also, we've got all of this, I guess, framework around what it needs to be. We go back to country and that idea of searching for country. And so the whalebones, what we actually did is we found a 3D model of the exact skeleton of this whale. And that's okay. And these are actually modelled directly off the whale skeleton. And so then we sort of took the skeleton apart and started actually playing, as we all love to do, with shape and how we can start to form this together. So they are all real whalebones. Well, you know what I mean in terms of their form. As a structure, they have a steel armature inside and they are then fiberglass. There's a lot of quite heavy. It's sitting on a massive truss. Thank you very much.
It's going.
It's going again.
That's where you go.
We're going to have to start a little poetry routine here. Does it work? Here we go. I should have just hold the boat. Again. Okay, we're going to go again.
There we go.
Just stay there. Yeah, so they've got a steel armature inside and fiberglass on the outside. We thought that it might tour. I'm going to hold it like this. And that's going to work again. And it did tour, so we did take it to Brisbane. But I think, you know, these things aren't permanent, so there's lots of ways we have to look at weight, weather, all of the things outside as well. And then this is a little video. It goes for sort of 3 minutes. What the show was, it was, I guess, dance. It was live musicians on stage as well. And so it sort of was Stephen, he's obviously Bangarra, Stephen Page, the idea of contemporary First Nation dance. And so it's him sort of bringing in the idea, it's very operatic, and it's sort of lifting those shows that he's done in theatres and placing them in outdoor spaces. And for me as a designer, that's super exciting. Like, that's just the thrilling ability to take, you know, performances and place them on country and allow audiences to connect to performance in a way that we would have done, you know, and we still do for 60,000 years. And there you kind of get to see a sense of the scale of the performer, to the scale of the bones, and smoke is always important as well. And so you can see these smoky drums that are at the front. And so we filled it with eucalypt, and they're very super way. It's a $44 drum. You create air, you take the bottom, you fill it with eucalypt, and then all of a sudden you light it, you've got this beautiful effect. And you can start to see that the multiple layers of storytelling come together. In Brisbane, so obviously we're on a beach here, Brisbane Festival were really keen to take this show, and we spent about 18 months trying to work out where to put it. And we looked at the new Olympic site that came up, also got rejected, extremely hilly, very difficult to put a stage there. We looked down at Manly, we wanted to connect to the water, but what we ended up doing was putting it on the Brisbane River. And we came up with, Stage Kings made this amazing company in Sydney. We worked out how to put them on a barge. So we had a huge barge. We cut the number of bones down just a little bit, and for 4 nights we were able to float that, well, it floated up the river and had 4 shows just outside, across from QPAC. So another, again, this show belongs outside, and we were very lucky to be able to do that. On a side note, on opening night, those waves look close to that structure. Yeah, you can see how it got very wet. So that's been a really awesome, beautiful project over the last couple of years that I've been a part of. And we had 8 dancers and 6 musicians. And they all became storytellers in their own right. They didn't just stay The musicians also got involved in the storytelling and the dance, and it was a beautiful little clan of dancers to bring together. This is like a little jump, and I know I've done a lot of work digitally as well over the years, and 477 Pit was a project, it would have been just before COVID kicked off, and they obviously have a very big screen, and it again talks to country. People play story, and it's that centre of that tech hub, and people often get there in the morning, probably 8 o'clock, 7:30, and they might not actually leave again until 12 hours later. So for me, I started, this is a little intro into what it is, and Owen, who was here from UAP, I worked with those guys, UAP, in making this work. He just gives a little intro spiel, and then I'll keep talking about what it is.
Indigenous art and culture play a vitally important role at 477 Pitt Street. The building's showpiece is a 12-metre long LED display and was curated by Urban Art Project's Owen Craven.
Art in public spaces, I think, is incredibly important. What is a space without people is a question that I often ask clients, and how do we attract people into those spaces? Architecture, landscape architecture is vitally important, but one of the things that art does is it connects with humans. It tells our stories, it reflects our culture, it reflects a time in the past, or it reflects who we might be into the future. So this is a work by Jake Nash. Jake started with a pretty simple premise. He wanted to reflect upon country and the seasons, and the fact that our First Nations people have a different form of season to what we do in contemporary Australia. And those seasons represent not only the weather and how we feel, but also how people have survived and have created the world's longest continual culture of people. And the work is just so powerful in its simplicity and charts a new course for who we are. And that's what art can do.
Thanks, Owen. I was supposed to do that interview, but I wasn't here, so he did it for me, which is lovely of him. But as I was saying before, I was really interested in bringing the outside in, as we all are. And for me, I broke it down into moments, into time periods. Obviously, you can see what that is. But I also was interested in, if we are bringing things from the outside inside, what are those things? And so all of what you just saw then, and what is on the screen every day, is from here, from the Sydney Basin. So we've got all sorts of different materials, plant materials, seeds, earth, it all comes from here. And that again comes back to this place. We're bringing this place to the inside. We also started looking at, how do you break this up? Like, if this runs, I was thinking it runs 24 hours a day. That saw we get to about 18 hours in the end. It kicks off about 5 in the morning, runs I think through to 11. And so if I wanted to shoot all of this material, I had to work out a really intense matrix of clips to try and be able to, run a clip at, I think every 10 minutes there's a new clip. So you put that into an hour, so that's 6 clips an hour. I also never wanted them to be the same every day, because if you came in at 6 o'clock in the morning and you saw the same thing every time at 6 o'clock in the morning, and then at 4 o'clock in the morning, it's kind of like, it's not really alive. The digital screen is just giving you the algorithm of that's what's programmed. So I also wanted to completely try and break the idea that you had to live within the system that was given to you as well. So you'd never see the same thing at the same time of day. And that was very challenging in a way, to try and find the right Excel spreadsheet that would allow that to happen. But we started looking at daytime. So what does water look like for us? What does rain? What does flower? What does dust? What does seed pods? What do they look like, and how are they formed? And in talking about time on country, people's time in a building, and it's such a large screen, you kind of have to think about what would be your experience. This is a small screen, but if you had a screen that big, I wanted to start playing with time. So we used a phantom camera, so it shoots at, over 1,000 frames a second. So we could just slow everything right down. And it actually makes you, because you know it's real, what you're seeing is real, but it's at a different speed. All of a sudden it changes the way you relate to what you're viewing and takes you to a place that I think makes you question what you're viewing. And hopefully in that moment, as you pass through that foyer into the next space, for that moment of time, all of a sudden you can think about the outside, where you are, and sort of connect to the place you're in. And then we sort of started also, we shot it all in a studio, which I think is important to know. And it was a really fun shoot. We just had so much material in there and we just had to play. And it's about, I think sometimes for me too, in the structure of how we make in the built environment, I can also forget to have fun with the material that's in front of me. As in, if it's all laid out, I just have to remember to go and get it and actually spend time with it and break it down and make mistakes and enjoy the actual process of making. And that was what this was about. I think for me as an artist too, that moment where you actually create something, where in that moment, that's where the magic begins to happen, and things that you don't know were possible could. The other thing I was really interested in doing, and sort of was at the centre of this idea, was the idea that what happens if we had a campfire that was burning from 6 o'clock at night to 11 p.m. at night every day in the same place? Because we don't have campfires in this urban setting. And I just wanted that to anchor the night experience. And so that's what we did. I think we've got it timed now, so it follows the sunset, and then after that point we go straight in to the campfire. So the campfire's always burning at night. I also used some language words as well, again embedding language from the Sydney Basin, and worked with Uncle Matty Doyle, who is an amazing man, and we've collaborated for many years, whether it's been on projects like this or at Bangarra. He is a really important part of not only, I guess, my relationship and practice, but for community in Sydney as well. And so those language words, and that's not what it looked like, that's a bit of a render, became sort of these moments where they'd tell you about where you were in the day. So they were your time markers. And those language words, again, really started to reflect basically this idea of they were just slow moving and effortless, and they just sit in the space and allow you to observe them. And I just thought I'd just play a little bit of this to sort of show you what it started to look like. And what you're seeing now, all of this is dust. We just floating through space. We've obviously mirrored, and we've got, I can't remember what flowers they are now, but we use them, slowed them down, dropped them at different speeds, and all of a sudden you begin, when you're seeing that on an 11-metre screen, hopefully you are experiencing your day and it takes you to another place just for that moment. So that was another really important work for me too. And it is completely different. It's not so sculptural and it's back to the digital, but the same principles apply. You've got to use your hands, you've got to have the idea, and then this can be the result. And that was sort of all I wanted to sort of share. Those two works are sort of, over between 2021 and 2020 today, basically. BrisFest only finished in September. I've done lots of other things too, but those two, I think for me are really, I just wanted to share them with you, and I think they also come back to connecting to country, but also to this work as well in relationship to the works in permanent spaces that I've made.
Thank you, Jake. Oh, my mic works.
Does mine?
Yeah. So, thank you. Beautiful work, Jake. And I think it's interesting to realise that, we have been working together for 8 years now, and that Eora was perhaps your first public artwork. Sort of like to say we discovered Jake, but I don't really think I can. No, can't tell them. So I thought it'd be interesting to talk about the work out the front, which is brand new. You know, it's very exciting. And it began because we got this space and really wanted Jake to do a piece right at the beginning. And we started having a conversation about intuition, you know, and about what intuition is and how it can connect you beyond all of the noise and technicalities that surround us, particularly a problem in architecture. So, you know, I was talking to Jake about, look, we're going to put some plastic down, you know, we're going to get some paint, we're going to open a bottle of red, right? And but then we started talking about other things, and we actually started talking about Eora. And the interesting thing is that that work on King Street, which tries to get onto Macquarie Street, is in sandstone, and it sits in that direct colonial setting, you know, the most important governmental precinct that brings with it, you know, I guess a lot of weight as well. And so putting that work there had enormous meaning, and that geometry and that sense of gathering and reconciliation that was embodied in that work. But then, of course, what we kind of realised is that, well, here we are in Australia Square, you know, and it is the consummate statement of international modernity in Sydney. You know, it could be anywhere. You've got a Calder out the front, you've got Nervy in the ceiling, you've got Seidler. It's none of those people came from Australia, right? And they brought the highest level of international modernism to Australia. And they brought with it a kind of scientific engineering rationality, which was at a level probably never reached in any city in Australia than is in Australia Square in the late 60s. You know, it's an amazing achievement. But then Eora, also a circle, that's a human hand, you know, and that is you can feel the earth in that work. And so in the form that Eora 2 takes here in this setting, it makes a very complimentary statement about, I think, the endurance of place and the endurance of an embedded Indigenous culture to not only resist processes of colonisation and endure, but also resist the globalisation and the process of international modernism, which is so flattening and crushing across the entire world, as good as it is, and still endure. Not really a question, but it's more of you know, Jake and I, we've been chatting away ever since he got here, and just loving that work in this setting, you know, and seeing more and more in ourselves. Yeah.
Yeah, I think too. And we were talking about relationships, context. How do they speak to each other? What are they saying to each other? And I've got here's the model. It was rectangular, and then, you know, things happen, and you cut things up, and that's what you get. But we sort of were looking at the ceiling and this architecture above us, and we just did this, you know, and you go, could that ever sit above you as well? Could there be, I guess, a fusion or a connection where you take the idea of the handmade or a different type of design language, and can it exist in the same moment as what we're seeing above us technically, or in the idea of modernism as well? And maybe it can. And I mean, I think that sounds like a pretty interesting and exciting place to explore, because you never know what might happen.
Yeah. So that was our cool idea when we finished this. We thought, well, let's do a building.
Stay tuned.
Let's do a building like that, you know, so yeah, very exciting. One question I wanted to ask you then before we open up for some other questions is, in the processes and the challenges of reconciliation in this country, what is the place of artwork?
I mean, art, I always steal from lots of people and mentors, but Stephen always talked about art as medicine. And it does. Art can do many things. It can truth tell, it can share, it can give you aspirations, it can hold you in the palm of your hand, it can be about love. But I think it also, most importantly, it brings people together, because this is an example of that. You walk through those doors, you see that work, and all of a sudden there's a conversation that exists with it. And that conversation is, I guess, led by us now. And for you guys who you guys that work here, you will all know that story. And even if you don't work here, you'll know that story and you'll be able to share that story. I mean, that's a very sort of open-armed way of being able to share culture, I mean, and talk about what the future is. But I think it does have to start in a moment of coming together. And that's what I think art does. It can do all of those things. Because it doesn't necessarily give you an answer. It makes you think about what you're viewing, and you have to work out your narrative in it. And I think for me that's always important about the work that I do, particularly up on King and Phillip. You know, when I stood in that corner, I looked at all of the institutions that arrived, and they're still here, and they're still running the country. And for me, by putting this symbol in that space up there, all of a sudden there's a new narrative, and it's led by design and by art. I don't want to build a building there. That's not my response. My response is to actually think about what this means. It means something to me, it means something to the place that it's on, but it also is in complete opposition to those institutions around the work. And we talk about context and where do these works sit. And by doing that, I think that is how we start to have art, design, conversations about what the future is, and reconciliation. When I made a work called Always back in 2019. It was not a permanent work with Sydney Festival. It was Corten steel, and Always, you could read Always from the water. It was up at Barangaroo on the headland, and on the back side of it was a mirror. So as you walked up to the back side of it, you saw yourself, a reflection of yourself walking towards the word always, as in always was, always will be. You also looked out to the landscape beyond. So the question there is, where do you stand as you see yourself in this word always, looking at country? So for me, that thinking, that idea, when I talk about the black lens, that's what that is. How do I engage and make sure that that conversation is right on the point of making people engage? And if they don't know what the work is and they have interest, they will find out.
Great answer. And I think what art can do is communicate that in a really direct way, in an unmediated way, which is what we need, right? Because there's so much noise, there's so many words, there's so much keeping us apart, and art can break through that directly. And now, sorry.
No, it's funny you say that, because this year, curatorially, the framework for the Blackout program at Sydney Festival, the first thing is gathering. We gather because we must. And in the world that we live in now, we are at a pretty disparate point, and there is so much pulling us apart from each other. But for 65,000 years on this country, we always come together culturally, and that shouldn't change. And at this moment, the thing we all should be doing is coming together, whether it's performing arts, whether it's visual arts, whether it's works like this that are permanent, by coming together and exploring something as a community, as an audience, as a group of people, as a family. You're actually, the rest of the existing world disappears because you're in that moment together and you're sharing it, and then you can go away and share it with the rest of your community or world.
Yeah. So art can create those moments.
That's right.
Are there any questions? Tim.
Okay, hello. Yeah, thanks for that. I think I have a question about the relationship between sculpture and architecture. So we've been describing it as a work of art, but I think it's fair to call it a work of sculpture as well. So just a general question about, in some ways architecture is a form of sculpture, but then this is a piece of sculpture within the context of this notable piece of architecture. And then a second layer to that is, why place it where it is? Because it could have been above you, it could have been on the ground, it could have been on a different wall. Sometimes we see sculpture that is outside of a piece of architecture, like at a forecourt or something like that. So just a general kind of question about the relationship between sculpture and architecture.
Yeah, I guess there's two parts to that. I've forgotten the question. No, kidding. No, I think that for me, because I work across so many mediums too, I can describe art. It can mean a lot of things to me. But the thing that I do, I guess, is I'll always make with my hands. That's the first thing. And so ultimately for me it is a 3D form from the very moment of conception. And I think too, if you look at all of the made and built structures in First Nation architectural or built spaces, from here it is all made by hand too. And there is specific ways to make, but they do end up becoming sculptural because of the forms they are and the materials you find to make those things as well. So I guess there's a clash of, or not a clash, there's just different ways to view and look in and how you interpret. But I think we were having a discussion too, and I think, Richard, you can answer what the entrance is and your how you want to introduce this company to everybody who walks in the door.
Well, you know, the thing about that is that I think that's where a real collaboration comes in and a real understanding of what the context for a work of art is. So it couldn't be anywhere else. It had to be on the wall, right? Because in this building, the circles are only in plan, right? They're not in section, they're not in elevation. And to do that, you had to step back and see it. And so one of the great challenges of this building, and one of the great joys of it, and its irrationality, is the way in which it radiates out 5 lifts. It's kind of crazy, right? And if you have a circle, you got totally disorientated. So you have to create space. You have to actually create space for people to be received into this challenging geometry. And if you go through every floor in this building, you will have great examples of how not to do it. So here, we had to give space to it. We have to give space. And we also didn't want, part of us sharing this space is that this is not, this space is far more than about our design studio. And so we didn't want to say, this is our design studio. We wanted a message there. And I think that's where we started. We want a message about our aspiration and our deference to country. But what's emerged out of that is something, I think, far more complex and sophisticated, which is an incredible dialogue with the international geometry and architecture of this building, which, to be honest, I reckon we only just saw when you arrived, right? We were mucking around with this thing, we got the lighting done this morning, and then it was kind of breathtaking. And you could really feel it, and I know it had a big effect on you when you walked in, and it's had a big effect on all of us, and we can't stop seeing more in it. That was a good question. Yeah. Arthur.
Thank you. I love seeing artists and architects collaborate, and I think we sort of speak the same language and we can feed on each other's energy. But I'd love to hear your, I guess, honest opinion on what's it like working with architects. Do you see maybe some examples from previous works?
We could talk later. No. No. It's because collaboration is so much a part of what I've done. There's only ever one designer on a theatre show or a TV show or a film. And so when you're working with architects, all of a sudden the conversation broadens out. And what I love is, and I was just talking to Annie about this too, it's story. It's what's the story. And that's because that's my background, that's where I come from, that's how I understand the world and design. And so all of a sudden we might have a conversation, and that conversation doesn't always start with a design, it never starts with a design outcome, it starts with a connection point. And then from that, I like to build narratives, and then all of a sudden you can talk about a design language, a place, a space, how people use it, and without actually making a mark on a piece of paper, all of a sudden, for me, I have a sense of what... The cutaways are probably a really good example of this. We kept talking about this scar, that scar. How do we heal the scar? What does that feel like? And then I think we used the word, was it hearth? Like, you know, what is that shape? How do we start to care for this place? And for me, they're the most exciting places to be in, because you need to know all the answers conceptually to be able to then move forward and start making the marks that will end up being what the end design will be.
That's a great answer to that question, which I don't think you answered at all. But any more questions? Corey.
So I don't really have a question, but I do want to thank Richard and Jake for collaborating on this artwork, because I know we haven't met yet, Jake, and I've already asked Richard to introduce me later on. But I'm an Aboriginal man. I'm the only Aboriginal man that works in this firm. And for the first time in my life, I can come to work and have something so amazing that makes me feel at home. And I bang on about designing for country to all these guys all the time. They're probably sick of me. But for me, that's what designing for country is all about, is fusing together what we have now and what was in the past. And my favourite thing you said earlier tonight was, can these two things exist at the same time? So the artwork and this nervous healing, can they exist at the same time? And isn't that what this whole point is? Like, designing for country for me is about how do we bring today to the past, you know, white people with black people, with all the foreign people, everyone, right? Like, Australia's not one person, or it's so much more now. And that's what I love about designing for country, is that we can do that. And so, yeah, it's a big thank you for me. I feel a bit emotional.
Jake, Corey.
Hi, Corey. That...
I was a bit late, sorry, Corey.
Well, that's... I mean, I didn't know that, and yeah, it's a beautiful... It's a gift now. So I guess for any First Nation person that comes in here and has a conversation around whatever project it is, in whatever position that might be, but that's the first moment of, can't say first contact, but that first expression of, I don't know what's the right word, is it reciprocity? I'm not sure. It's a gift, I guess. And I think that's also part of what Eora up the street is as well. There's a piece on the ground that is direct reflection of the work. So you can step inside a circle and you can be inside it. And you can all of a sudden find your place within this place, even if it's not your country, even if it's not your studio. You can be welcomed and hopefully find a moment of belonging. And Richard and I were talking about that earlier. The circle, it doesn't matter where you're from or who you are, that thing will always unite you, because it's a never-ending loop of cycles of country, cycles of families, birth and death, of coming together, of gathering. So anyway, we can talk more. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, I think that's a great point to end on. So please hang around, have a drink. Jake will really answer your question over a drink when no one else can hear. And yeah, I'd like to say a sincere thank you to Jake, and perhaps you can join me in thanking him so much, not only for the talk, but for the work.
Yeah. Also, a thank you to you, Richard, too. From that very first moment of those conversations and that journey, you championed that work, and Annie did, and Dan, and there's quite a few people in this room who helped it become a reality, and for it to sort of become a part of your family in a way is a beautiful that's actually probably what reconciliation is. It's come together and it's brought people together, and now it's brought us together, and it also talks to the future. So I'm so proud to have this work here with you guys, and let's do more.
Let's do more. Let's do a building.
Let's do a building. Yeah. Thanks. You're the best.